Welcome to the best Battlefield settings guide for Battlefield 2042 Season 6. Sit back, relax, and let's get into this, shall we? Fire up your console. We'll discuss PC-specific settings later in the video. Controller settings can be very much personal preference. I would highly recommend you set the buttons to alternate. This will make it so the right analog is crouch and melee goes to circle. This will help you speed up your gameplay, crouch in the middle of gunfights, crouch bounce, go prone, and dodge your targets. When it comes to the controller mappings, I like to flip these controllers here. So I set the ping comma rows to R2, and then we go over to weapons and equipment. I set fire to R1 and zoom to L1. So aiming and firing my weapon is on the front triggers. Highly recommend this. It's going to speed up your gameplay. If you do change this, make sure to go through and also change the grenades as well to L2. Similar options for Xbox as well. This definitely works for me, but if you do this, you are going to have to go through and make sure everything is set correctly. If you do run into any issues, just restore to default and start again. We could go through every single setting here. I'm not going to do that. We're going to be here for hours. Use what works in previous games or other FPS titles that you play. When it comes to vehicle controls, highly recommend you open up a private server and have an experiment with various options and see what works for you. Honestly, we could be here for hours looking through all of these, so let's not do that. I play inverted, so these options are mostly on inverted for me. Obviously, use what works for you. Turn off controller vibration. It does affect your aim. No need for it to be on. Soldier aim sensitivity, I use maximum 100. Would not recommend that for new players. Somewhere between 30 and 50 is going to be fine. Inverted, if you use that. FOV, as we discussed earlier. ADS field of view, as we discussed earlier. Uniform soldier aiming, basically, if you have this on and you scoped him with a sniper and turned 90 degrees to the right, and then did the same with a pistol with iron sights, both would feel the same in terms of sensitivity. Highly recommend this on. As for the coefficient, lots of discussion in the community as for what works best. You could have a play here. Honestly, I would recommend just default values. Soldier aim assist. This is when the aim slows down over the reticle over an enemy target and gets sticky to it. So your sticky aim assist. I would leave this on 100. Slowdown is the slowdown effect from the soldier aim assist option without decreasing its sticky functionality. So basically, your aim just slows down. I kind of like this, so I leave this on 100. However, I do not have zoom snap on. So as you watch my gameplay and I'm snapping to targets, that is all me. That is me snapping to them, snapping to headshots and all that good stuff. I like this on 0. It feels more natural to me. If you're a new player, just leave this on default. But the more experienced players might want to have a play with this. If you find the aim is too sticky, especially during slowdown, you can have a play with these options. Somewhere between 60 and 80% should feel fine. For now, I'm going to leave this on 100 for myself. You can now change the soldier aim input curve. If you're just coming from a previous Battlefield title, you may want to copy the setting there. If you're coming from Warzone and use linear, you might want to put that to linear. Personally, I am just using standard for the time being. I tried BF1, tried BF5 the other night, they feel great, but my muscle memory in this game is as it is, so I've left it on standard. Of course, I could go 2042, but standard feels just right for me. Something about it is just fine. In basic terms, the aim response curve is the relationship between the inputs on your analog sticks and the resulting response in-game. With standard, for example, your aim rate will gradually speed up as you apply force to the analog sticks. This will be more forgiving if you accidentally press too hard. Linear is a one-to-one feel. Whatever force is applied is reflected directly in-game. Linear is the most consistent and, in theory, better for building muscle memory. However, if you've not used this in previous games or other titles, it may feel extremely off and you may not enjoy it. Again, highly recommend using what you used previously for experience. Again, highly recommend using what you used in other games, especially if you come from BF5, choose BF5, BF1, BF1. For experienced players, you may wish to experiment with linear. Just like sensitivity settings, there is not an exact answer. There's always pros and cons to each. Again, you can do the same for the soldier zoom aim inputs and the stick input acceleration presets. I've always recommended you have no acceleration, so set this to 0. On 0, your aim is going to be instant, no acceleration. Highly recommend it. Soldier sprint, click or hold. I like click. Double tap forward to off. Sprint button is there as well. Sprint to vault over, don't like that. I have that off. Always use traversal sprint. I like to have this on. So this changes it so that you always enter traversal sprint immediately upon activating sprint. Soldier weapon zoom, do you like to toggle or hold? I prefer hold. Zoom weapon button there if you want to change that. Steady scope, toggle or hold. Once again, I prefer hold. Steady scope button there changes, and there we have the soldier zoom aim sensitivity. So this is your sensitivity while aiming down sights. 100 here is 100% of your hip fire sensitivity. So it's 1-to-1. If you want to double it, set this to 200. If you want to halve it, set it to 50. Parachute auto deploy off, and all of these options are very much personal preference. Use what works for you. I like to leave these ratios on the default values. It's in my muscle memory now. I like to just leave it there. If you set it to 100, this keeps the vertical and horizontal movement very similar. All I'm going to say is you probably got to have a play of this, but at default, it works fine for me. If you did take my advice and turned on uniform soldier aiming, make sure all of these values are left at 100. So all of your zoom aim sensitivities will be exactly the same in terms of how they feel. Vehicle aim sensitivity, I would recommend somewhere between 50 and 70. Personal preference with that one. Inverted controls there if you want to change those. Vehicle third person, we changed that earlier. Tank, gunner, and transport vehicle free look sensitivities, I leave these on 100. Vehicle aim input curves can be changed here. I would recommend having the same as infantry, like we previously discussed. Vehicle aim relative controls, turn this off. Basically, when set to on, the vehicle will attempt to move relative to where the camera is aiming. It can be quite confusing. I'd recommend leaving this off. Vehicle boost set to click, hold, up to you. Vehicle weapon zoom, toggle or hold again, and you can change the buttons here for these zooms. Invert vertical flight, we discussed that earlier. Aircraft and helicopter control sensitivities, I like to leave on 70. Helicopter control assist, make sure this is turned off. On screen right now, you can see the differences between off and on for the third person aircraft camera roll. Use whichever you feel works best for you. Again, here we have vertical aim ratios. This time for the vehicles, I would recommend using the same as the infantry settings you set earlier. Decouple tank turret aiming from turning. I would recommend turning this on. Basically, what will happen is the game will attempt to keep the crosshair at its current position even when turning the vehicle. Controller tuning, turn off vibration. It will affect your aim. No need for that. The dead zone is basically the control input that is required for input activation. So the lower the dead zone, the more responsive the controller is going to be. However, if you set it too low, it could be too sensitive and you'll find it very hard to track targets, particularly at longer ranges, and be very steady in your aim. Somewhere between 10 and 15 is going to be fine for the dead zone on both analog sticks. I personally use 13. I would recommend leaving the actual dead zone and max input threshold on default values. You can have a play of these and make your controller more responsive. However, it doesn't feel consistent to me, so I've left these on default values. Highly recommend turning down the dead zone and max input threshold for the buttons here. You'll feel much more snappier. Highly recommend. When it comes to the console settings, Xbox will be very similar here. Make sure your resolution is set to the maximum. There is no 120 Hz in this game, sadly, so that's not going to make a difference. Turn on HDR if you use that, and that should be good to go. Also, in the save data and game app settings, I would recommend setting the game preset to performance mode. Also, for the controller, in the accessories option on PlayStation, I'm sure there's something similar on Xbox, go to controller general and change the communication method to use USB cable. Unless, of course, you're sat really far back and actually want to use Bluetooth. Field of view is the amount of observable world in front of you. A higher FOV means more peripheral vision. You can see targets around you, but targets at a distance become smaller and more difficult to track and aim at. A lower FOV, you lose that peripheral vision, but targets are much bigger and easier to aim and track. More benefits to going higher, so I'd recommend somewhere around 90. Vehicle third person view may as well be set to the maximum so you can see all the way around you when in a vehicle. Here is a comparison of ADS field of view on and off. I use on, recoil feels less visual recoil, and much more manageable. Highly recommend. I would recommend a brightness somewhere between 50 and 65. I don't use HDR, but if you do, you can calibrate your HDR capabilities here. Set motion blur to 0 and turn off these options at the bottom here. Make sure HUD and HUD prompts are turned on. Control hints, reactive hints here, same as previous. You can enable or disable the HUD physics movement here, up to you. Personally, I used to use this quite a lot. Now I've turned it off. At the bottom of the screen here, you can show the vehicle seat info and see which seats are available. Set the soldier compass to always on, and turn down the camera shake amount all the way to the bottom, unless you really like that effect when explosions are going off nearby. Some various colorblind options here. If you are colorblind, have a play of those if you are. If you're not, you could use this to completely change the color scheme of the heads-up display. Might be worth having a play with. Recommend setting show kills made by squad and nearby. Damage number visibility, leave on score log. Damage number size, small, medium, and large. Personal preference, I would recommend small. Offset can be changed here if you wish to. I leave chat onto when active. A lot of the time though, I do disable this manually in game. If you want to turn off the chat, you can do that at the top here, and some various options to change the chat box size as well. You can change the size and scaling of the heads-up display here if you wish. On the right-hand side, you can see the effects of your changes. Personally, default is fine with me. Crosshair settings are incredibly important and can affect your aim and improve you as a player. Recommend crosshair opacity on 100, outline opacity on 50. I would recommend a crosshair color of a pinky kind of purple. On the right there, you can see how visible it is in various conditions, terrains, and especially lighting conditions. Pink purple is very easy to see and track with. Greens, yellows, reds, highly recommend them as well. Crosshair thickness, I believe, works best on thin. There is default and thick there. You can see the changes on the right if you wish. Crosshair projection. Basically, when disabled, the crosshair is static and always aligned with the center of the screen. With this turned on, the crosshair is projected and can lessen the feeling of motion sickness caused by certain camera motions. Personally, I would recommend setting this off. Now, this hit indicator section is incredibly important. Make sure you listen in here. Leave the opacity on 100 unless you really want to change that. And at the bottom here, we have a little color scheme going on here to help improve my gameplay and be a much more faster player. So for normal hits, I've got blue. For headshots, I've got red. And for kills, I've got green. So basically, if I see blue, I've only done normal damage. If I see red, I know I've hit a headshot, I've done a lot more damage, and a body shot might be all that's needed. Of course, if I see green, I know to instantly snap to the next target or move to a different position. So potentially, if you set a similar color scheme here, as soon as you see that kill color, you're going to be able to react and move around the map much, much faster. Highly recommend something similar. Turn on armor broken hit indicator, set indicator color to something bright, yellow works for me, and turn on show damage type. Soldier damage color, I leave this on blue, vehicle damage color on yellow, and the vehicle damage thickness to thick. Minimap settings, again, very important. On the right there, you can see the effects of your changes here. Rotate with view, recommend turning on. And the rest of these options, I would copy. These work very well for me. Highly recommend them. Again, if you adjust any of the settings here, you can see the changes on the right-hand side. You have various options here to change up the heads-up display icons. That's the flag icons, player icons, all that good stuff. I would recommend mostly leaving pretty much all of this on default unless you really want to change it. However, I would recommend changing the zoomed opacity. That is when you aim down sight, you want to change the opacity of the icons there so they don't get in the way and block targets. Somewhere between 10 and 20 is going to be fine. As for the sound settings, leave master volume on 100. I like there to be a little bit of music, so 60 is fine with me. Turn it completely off if you don't want that. Leave sound effects volume on 100 and set in-game announcer volume to 60 so it's not too loud. Currently, I am using the 3D headphone settings. I do use Logitech and Astro headsets, so I have tried those in the past. Personally, I think 3D headphones is the best for footsteps. Highly recommend you have a play of these. War Tapes is a classic Battlefield setting. Very loud, very immersive. You might enjoy it. Do give it a go. Hit indicator, that's the sound when you hit a target. Leave this on. In-world radio music, turn off if you don't want that. A new option at the bottom here, the music package. This is various options from previous seasons. I'm just going to leave this on default. Voice chat is turned off for me. Don't need that. Have a play of these settings if you have it on. And there are some subtitles options here if you need them. Enable crossplay so you can actually find a game. Control hints appear on screen and can be helpful for new players. Reactive hints such as the reload hint can be helpful too, so I would leave both of these on. Turn off share usage data if you don't want to share your information with EA. Turn off player created content if you don't want to see that here. If you host any servers, turn on allow followers to allow players to join you when you join a new server. Turn on show XP type server and show party in menu. On the network tab, you don't need to change any of these settings unless you have some issues with latency. Turn on these options at the bottom here, record your gameplay and send it to EA or anyone that can help you. Now onto the settings for PC specifically. Set full screen mode to full screen, set your monitor here, set your highest resolution and the highest refresh rate. I like to use a mixture of graphics settings here. Highly recommend you try my settings and go with those. Of course, you can set this all to low to get the most out of your system. If you are on a lower end system, do try dynamic resolution scaling options here and have a play of those. If you have an NVIDIA graphics card and want to squeeze out some more frames, you can turn on DLSS here. Have a play of the settings, quality works quite well. Ray tracing can make your game look absolutely amazing, but at the cost of some FPS. Quite a lot in fact. Make sure this is off. NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency should be set to Enabled plus Boost. Basically, this will reduce system latency, increasing PC responsiveness and making your aim feel snappier and smoother. Set the latency flash indicator to off. Turn on future frame rendering if you want to squeeze out some more frames at the cost of input lag. Recommend turning this off, however. Vertical sync turned on will increase input lag, so turn this off. I actually use the default key bindings for PC. Highly recommend you have a play of these if you want a custom setup here. Do recommend turning on mouse raw input. This will make your aim feel nice and snappy. And of course, you can change your key bindings on foot and on vehicles in the separate tabs here. If you are on PC, right click the desktop here, click NVIDIA control panel or the equivalent of whatever GPU you use. Click change resolution, set your highest here and make sure the refresh rate is set to the highest as well. On the manage 3D settings, I would recommend copying my settings here. To make it a little easier to spot targets and brighten up your game, I would recommend changing the digital vibrance here up to 70% on the adjust desktop color settings. Various accessibility options down here if you need them. We did discuss many of these before. Some of them are in other sections, so if you changed it previously, no need to change it here. You might want to have a play with the concussion effect. You can have it bright or dark. On screen right now, you can see the differences. And you may want to turn down the visual and sound effects for Zane's perseverance trait. Subtitle options here again, we discussed those earlier, and some extra control options here. I believe many are in the previous settings, so change these if you need to. Hope you guys enjoyed this guide. Thank you very much for watching. Do be sure to drop a like if you did, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Take it easy, guys. Catch you later.